We start off with a character named Nightmare, and here he is in all his glory. Yes, it's the adventures of Nightmare and his sidekick, Sleepy. And if you want to follow along with Nightmare's adventures, then grab your copy of Clue Comics number 8 from September of 1944 by Hillman Publishing. And you'll never guess what our hero's day job is. He's a professional wrestler. He and his young manager have fallen on some hard luck because the pro wrestling promoter cheated them out of their paycheck. I personally am shocked that a wrestling promoter would pull some sort of shenanigans in the pure and clean world of professional wrestling, but nonetheless our heroes are starving and homeless. And here's what our hungry heroes look like at night when they put on their costumes. Nightmare looks like a cross between Batman and Captain America. The sidekick Sleepy complains that he's too hungry to climb up the side of a building. And being a pro wrestler, guess who Nightmare must encounter? Yes, The Undertaker. And after stopping The Undertaker before you can say WrestleMania 30, our heroes receive some reward money, which is good news because Sleepy tells us that he's not had a decent meal in a week. I suppose this kind of characterization was supposed to make the comic readers sympathetic to these regular guys who also must struggle to make a living. Another character to be called Nightmare is a villain who fights Doctor Strange. He shows up in 1963. You can see him from time to time in Marvel's Strange Tales, which would later become titled Doctor Strange. Nightmare would ride upon his horse named Dreamstalker. Now, Dreamstalker is a cool name. Why didn't they name this guy Dreamstalker and his horse could be called Nightmare instead? Well, they didn't because 9 years earlier, Casper the Friendly Ghost had a horse named Nightmare. But this video was not about characters named Nightmare. Nor is it about the great title from St. John's Publishing called Nightmare, which had some very scary and weird covers. And it's hard to tear myself away from these great illustrations. I mean, wow. Take a look at this Matt Baker cover from 1954. But in this video, we are going to concentrate on two stories where someone is having bad nightmares when they fall asleep. So if you had to guess the identity of one of the two comic companies that probably did a story on nightmares, you might guess EC Comics as being one of them. And you'd be right, but you'll never guess the other company. We start off with Haunt of Fear number 17 from 1950. I highly recommend you pick up the reprint that come out years later, but you'll need to ask for number 3 if you go for the reprint. EC Comics had some peculiar numbering issues over time. Our story starts off with the title called Nightmare, and it was written and drawn by Johnny Craig. We see a very disturbing angle from inside a grave, and we see an employer attending the funeral of one of his employees. The widow of the deceased starts screaming that the casket is empty. The employer thinks that she's become hysterical, but the other funeral attendees open the casket and strangely confirm that it is indeed empty. Then, for some strange reason, they declare that the casket must have a body. And then they look at the employer. He'd make a fine body replacement. They grab him and stuff him into the coffin. Then they nail it shut while laughing maniacally. Just then the man wakes up from his terrible dream. He tells himself that he should stay awake and read, but then he goes for a walk. He hears someone calling his name. He walks further and further through the muddy slime, and each step his feet sink further and further into the mud. He then realizes that he's trapped and he's going to be buried alive just like his dreams have been warning him. He soon is choking on the mud, but immediately he wakes up and realizes that he had dozed off again, and his nightmares are taking over his life. He decides to seek professional help. In this story, the man having the nightmares is named John Severin, which is interesting because John Severin was a comic book artist who did work for EC Comics, but since this story is written and drawn by Johnny Craig, this could be a huge coincidence since Severin wouldn't work for EC Comics until a few months later, or the two artists knew each other and Craig was having a bit of fun at a fellow artist's expense by using his name in a story. Regardless, John Severin tells the psychiatrist about the horrible nightmares that he's been having. He tells the doctor about a nightmare where he's been called to a graveyard. He walks into the crypt and hears the voice calling him by name from inside the casket. Then a dead body inside the casket grabs John Severin and pulls him into the coffin. The lid slams shut. The dead body squeezes the air out of him, and he knows he's going to die and be buried alive. But the doctor has good news. After just this one visit and the telling of one nightmare, the doctor has come to the conclusion that Mr. Severin is simply overworked, and the best thing to do in this situation is to take a vacation. And now John Severin is starting to feel better already. He agrees with this diagnosis. Yes, sir, John's a new man, and he heads over to the construction site to ask his boss for a few days off work. When he gets to the job site, most of the construction workers have already taken their lunch break. He quickly inspects the site and sees that they are all ready to start pouring the concrete when they return to work. He's very glad that the work crew is right on schedule. And just as some of the work crew starts to finish the lunch and get back to work, some of the work crew has already started to pour the concrete into the area where John Severin is. Mr. Severin notices that the concrete is starting to pour down upon him, but then it dawns on him that this is not really happening. It must be one of those crazy yet realistic dreams where he hears shouting and then gets buried alive. And now that he's been told by the doctor that he's just overworked, he takes all of this in laughable stride. He's not going to scream and get all worried when he knows that he's going to wake up any minute now. This was all observed by a nearby construction crew who can't understand why John Severin would laugh through the whole ordeal. What a story. So did you guess who the other publisher was? The one that printed a similar story of someone having terrible nightmares, and they printed it a whole year earlier than EC. Give yourself a hand if you said Walt Disney's Comics and Stories number 101 from Dell Publishing in 1949. Now, why do I think that this comic matches up nicely with the last story we looked at? Well, Donald Duck is going to have some horrible nightmares. I kid you not. We start off with Donald being chased by a horrible alien, and he's running for his life. I've got to escape these men from Mars somehow. Unfortunately, Donald falls into the mouth of a large alien. Then we discover that Donald was having a nightmare, and his nephews run in to check on him. The boys have to shake Uncle Donald out of his terrifying nightmare, and poor Donald is a nervous wreck. He's had 9 nightmares this week alone. The boys recommend he see a doctor, but Donald's already done that, and the doctor gave him some sleeping pills, but he's too scared to try them. The nephews tell him to go ahead and follow the doctor's advice, so Donald takes some. Then Donald is driving alongside a very narrow road on a mountainside. A sharp curve ahead, oil on the road, and my brakes are shot. Help! Help! Screech! Help! Screech! Get the doctor over here quick. Uncle Donald is having another nightmare. When the doctor arrives, he says his condition is worse than I thought. We'll have to try remedy number 2. He must do something that he hates to do. The boys tell the doctor that he hates to do anything. The doctor suggests that Donald crochet little doilies. Donald gets angry and declares he won't crochet doilies because he's a rugged He-Man. And this is the reaction the doctor was counting on. Since crocheting is so distasteful to Donald, this exercise will relax the nervous tension and Donald will sleep like a log. So Donald studies the fine art of crocheting, and sure enough, it relaxes him. So much that he finds himself walking the plank from a pirate ship. He then falls into the ocean only to be surrounded by vicious sharks. He screams and swims desperately. Meanwhile, the nephews call up the doctor, but the doctor is hesitant to try remedy number 3, so Donald must keep on crocheting doilies. So Donald goes back to crocheting, and he soon falls asleep yet again. Wolves on my trail, and 40 miles to the nearest trading post. Every time I look back, I see more wolves. Must be 10,000 of them. But Donald falls into the waiting teeth of the pack of wolves. Then Huey calls the doctor and explains the situation, so the doctor tells the boys that remedy number 3 is for Donald to be scared by something in real life, more terrible than his nightmares. So the next day, the nephews step outside and go and find the most scary bearskin rug they can get their hands on. But Donald soon falls asleep. And now somebody left the door of the lion cage open. And the lion chases Donald up into a tree, just as the nephews come in, and they wake up Uncle Donald. But Donald was so scared of the lions that this little bear doesn't scare him one bit, and he chases the boys out of the house. While returning the bearskin rug, the nephews run into Daisy Duck, and they tell her everything that's been happening to Uncle Donald. And when she finds out that he's been crocheting doilies, she gets excited and wants to see them. Then Daisy runs into Mrs. Gobblechin and tells her all about Donald's crocheting, so both of them come to the front door, and Donald sees them coming. He quickly tries to hide the evidence. Realizing that he's trapped, Donald tries to make a run for it, but the ladies see him leave, and they hop into a taxi to follow him. This terrifies Donald. Donald speeds up and zigzags, trying to lose the girls. He even heads up a mountainside, and the road has just washed out. He speeds up just to get away from Daisy. Donald lands in the pool tank where they keep sharks. He then has to swim for his life to avoid the sharks. When he reaches dry land, he sees the girls coming, and they've come to find him. Donald must now choose which outcome is worse: face the women or face the sharks. He chooses to face the sharks and starts fighting them hand to fin. Meanwhile, the girls figure out that Donald is deliberately trying to avoid them. Donald makes it to the other side, but now he has to stay up high in the trees to avoid being caught. Daisy runs off and gets her fellow females to join in the hunt. Donald has so far stayed up in the trees to avoid being captured, but now he's run out of hanging vines to swing from, and he's directly over the lion cage at the zoo. All of a sudden, the zoo grounds are being overrun with women, all looking for Donald, as one of them yells, "Don't fail to look for him in the trees." Donald does the sensible thing and jumps into the lion cage. Days later, the nephews are still looking for their Uncle Donald, and they now are asking a zookeeper. The zookeeper has seen their Uncle Donald. He's been living in the lion's cage. He sleeps 16 hours at a stretch, wakes up and yells, "I'm cured, I'm cured," and goes back to sleep again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Graphic Man look at nightmares in comic books. Well, literature lad, do you have anything to add to that?
Sweet dreams.